All right, we are live. So your past pain, the trauma from your past, can be one of the best things that happens to you. When you allow God into your past and allow him to walk you through it. Today, I'm going to show you how to bring God into your past pains so you're not imprisoned and shackled to your past. Because if you don't process your past with God's help, your past is always going to be present and it's going to keep you imprisoned to the past. I'm going to show you how to walk through that today with God's help. I'm your guide. He does the transformation. So I want you to think about Joseph here, because as I'm talking about trauma and pains from your past, I'm sure you may be thinking, you know what, Chaz, you don't know what happened to me. This happened to me. My stepfather, my mom, whatever, someone from my family did unspeakable things to me. And I'm not here to discount those at all. I'm here to show you how God can use that past so it's no longer keeping you shackled and imprisoned, so you can become free and live a life of love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the fruits of the Spirit. Think about Joseph. And if you don't know Joseph's story, Joseph was the favorite of his dad. And his brothers, all of his brothers, except for his younger brother, hated him. They were jealous. They were envious of him. They sold him into slavery. Talk about a dysfunctional family. Your family members, your brothers, selling you into slavery. So they did this. And now to further the pain, not only did they cause this pain to Joseph by selling him into slavery, they took a coat that his dad had specially made. It was a special coat for Joseph, and they dipped it in animal blood, and they brought it to their father, and they said, look at this coat. It's torn up. A wild animal must have gotten Joseph. Now his father is mourning the death of his favorite son because these brothers were reacting out of jealousy and envy. So Joseph, we don't know everything that happens to him, but I can't remember the exact time, but there's around a decade. Joseph is imprisoned. He's in slavery. And everywhere he goes that we know from the accounts, he finds favor with his master. And his master, like I believe Potiphar, puts him in charge of his household. But then Potiphar's wife is making moves on Joseph, and Joseph's like, whoa. And he's like avoiding her with a 10-foot pole. And Potiphar's wife ends up accusing Joseph of trying to rape her. Then he's thrown back into prison. So think about this. And there's probably more things that we don't even know about Joseph's story. So we fast forward to where Joseph goes from being in prison. Check this out. This is a God thing. Being in prison to the second in charge of Egypt. That is God moving in your life. And it was during a time where they had 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph interpreted the dream of Pharaoh and let him know this is what it means. And so after interpreting the dream, Pharaoh said, hey, I'm going to put you in charge so that you can help us stock up in the 7 abundant years so we can be ready for the 7 years of famine. So the land goes through the abundant years, and all of a sudden they're in the years of famine. And guess who comes knocking on the door? Because Egypt is hurt. The people from outside of the country hear that Egypt has lots of food. And so his brothers, not knowing Joseph is in charge of Egypt, looks to get some food. Their dad sends them there. Go to Egypt. I hear there's food up there. And so soon they are face to face with Joseph, and they don't know it's Joseph at first. And I'm not going to go through the story, but they finally realize it's their brother who they sold into slavery years before. And so they are shaking in their boots. This guy is second in charge of Egypt, just below Pharaoh. And so they're imagining him doing things to him that they did to him. And Joseph stopped them and said, do not fear. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. That's reframing your past. Imagine that. With some past traumas that you have, being able to interpret that. In my own life, I remember when I was very young, I was put into a hole on the beach because my family wanted to go play in the ocean, my older brothers. Speaking of brothers, they were like 10 and 9 years older, and they were supposed to babysit me. I think I was like 3. They dug a hole in the sand. They put me in the hole, and I was terrified. And I didn't even realize why I have fears. And a lot of it goes back to that incident. And so I remember this one time, as I remember the incident, I was bringing it before God. I'm like, God, where were you in this? And he distinctly said, in my spirit, I didn't hear an audible voice. I'm not saying you can't hear an audible voice. He said, Chaz, I actually had a nickname back then, which I'm not going to tell you. I was right there protecting you from the waves, from the sand collapsing around you. And I'm like, wow, thank you, Lord. And so what I want to take you through is how to reframe your past with God's help so you can look at that past trauma. And it's not something that happens overnight. Sometimes people can do it quickly. Other times it happens slowly. So as I was working through being able to regulate my emotions so they don't regulate me, because most of my life I suppressed my emotions. And by the way, when you suppress your emotions, they don't disappear. They come back much uglier later in life. You ever been a victim of road raging, or maybe you road rage on somebody? Why? Is it because they cut you off? Is it because they're following too close that you just, or they do, on you? No, it's a trigger, usually because of something from the past that you haven't processed. And then you constantly live in this loop where you get triggered, you react, blam, and then like you feel regret or shame. And you just continue to do this loop over and over and over again. So what I want to show you is how to eliminate that loop from trigger to reaction to shame, to pain to shame. Okay? So when I was talking to God about realizing I wasn't aware of my emotions, I was suppressing them, and it was keeping me from living a fulfilled, joy-filled life. And I said, Lord, I realize I lack awareness and I need help with this. And I was going to podcasts, to books about the science of behavior and how to reframe things in the world's way. And God distinctly said to me, and I'll never forget, go check out David in the Psalms. And as soon as I heard his voice, I realized, I'm like, oh my goodness. David, many times in the Psalms, he'll start out, oh Lord, why have you forgotten me? In Psalm 13, it's only 6 verses. And David goes from, God, why have you forgotten me? You could just imagine him pouring his heart out. And 5 verses later, he's singing praises to God. So how do you go from, God, why have you forsaken me? And then 5 verses later, praising God? I call it the David framework. David created it, inspired by God, and I just put a name to it. And so there's 5 steps, and I'm going to focus on 1 today. It's about dumping your emotion. David was raw and real with his emotion. And then it's about asking God certain questions, okay? And then it's about verifying God's character. He's gracious, he's merciful, he's loving, he's my rock. I hold on to him sometimes. He's my shield, he's my refuge. So I'm shifting from me, I'm like forsaken, I'm forgotten, to asking God questions, talking to him, taking my eyes off my circumstances, looking at him, realizing he's a good God and he has my back. And then I start interpreting, and this is what we're going to focus on today, is interpreting the circumstances through God's lens, through how God sees things, not us. This is huge. When we focus on the challenge, when we focus on the problems, they become so big, they become so huge, and something from our past that we keep replaying and replaying and replaying is stuck in our mind. And we have a constant feedback loop, a neural pathway that if we don't short circuit it, it's going to control us and suck everything good out of our life. I know because I was there. Big time. So you look at the challenges, they're huge, they're big. You need to look up and see things from God's perspective. In Colossians 3:2, it says, don't shuffle along. This is the Message version. Don't shuffle along, eyes to the ground, absorbed with the things right in front of you. Have you ever been there? You're focusing on this worry and this challenge. Oh, this is going to happen tomorrow if I don't do this. And how about this? You wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh man, what's going on? Those problems become so big. I were never intended to carry those burdens. We're there to cast our fears, our worries on God because he cares for us. But how do we do that? That's what we're going to work through. When you take your eyes off your challenges and start, the verse says, don't shuffle along with your eyes to the ground, absorbed. Have you ever been there? Absorbed with all these things in front of you? Look up. Take your eyes off your challenges and look up. And look on Jesus. That's where the action is. So when you take your eyes off the challenges and focus them on him, focus your eyes on him, then he gets his proper perspective, which is almighty, all-knowing, infinite, okay? And the challenges become small. And then, so that is identifying things through God's lens, his perspective, how he sees things. And then the final D is delight. That's praising and worshiping God. And so that's an entire framework. And if you want the David framework, I'd be happy to send it to you. Put a comment below. Send me an email at chazhorn@chazhorn.com, firstlastname@firstlastname.com, and put David framework in the subject line. Okay, so I want you to focus on I, and that's interpreting the circumstances through God. Okay, and I imagine we don't know Joseph and how he went from where he was to telling his brothers, hey, it's okay. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Imagine that. They sold him into slavery, many years in prison, and who knows, whips and chains and shackles, and who knows what he went through. You can only imagine, okay? So I want you to think about a past experience that you've had. And if you are reacting and you're not sure why you are reacting, it's probably because you lack awareness. And here's a true sign that if you live from a place of self-promotion and self-protection, that's a sign that you're living out of your false identity and you lack awareness, emotional intelligence, or as I say, spiritual intelligence. And so if you have a thought and a challenge and you're not sure exactly what that is that's causing you to react because you're road raging or whatever that trigger that causes you to, even if you don't vocalize it internally, have you ever had something that happens to you, someone you care about says something to you and it tears you apart, or you did something that was embarrassing and you keep playing this thought over and over and over, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year? I've been there. It's a good sign that you have something from your past that you haven't processed with God's help, and it's keeping you imprisoned to your past. The past is no longer in the past, it's in your present. So what you need to do first and foremost, if you're having these feelings, just bring it before God and say, Lord, I need your help. I'm stuck. I don't trust you like I should. All transformation begins with the truth. God knows exactly what you're thinking. And if you have fear, you're not trusting God like you should. None of us here this side of heaven trust God like we should. And I raise my hand and I say this prayer many times. Lord, I don't trust you like I should. That's truth. That's the truth. Jamie Winship talks about truth tell, form change, transformation. And truth tell is before God, being honest with him. Lord, I don't trust you like I should. This fear is really affecting me. And then you're going to form change, which is, what do you want me to know about this fear? And listen. Many times it's not an audible voice. It could be an audible voice. Sometimes it's something in your spirit. Just be very, very aware of when you ask God a question. It could be a picture. It could be a sense. Be aware. It could happen now. It could be the first impression. It could happen later in the day. Just be acutely aware of what's going on after you ask God a question. Many times he'll speak to you differently than me because he created each and every one of us unique and special. And so he's going to communicate with you in a way that is special to you, but wouldn't really be that special to me. So be aware of what's going on. So you have something you're taking before God. Lord, there's something bothering me. I don't know what it is. I'm afraid, but I don't know why. What do you want me to know about this fear? And allow God to speak to you in that fear. And then you can say, God, what is it that you want me to do about this fear? And listen. Now, if you know, or if you're not connecting the dots from something painful from your past and don't realize how it's playing itself out right here and now in your world, take that past event and say, Lord, I was listening to a guy on a podcast with Taylor Welch, and this guy was, he was sexually abused by his stepfather. He went through all sorts. He was whipped. Whipped and whipped and whipped over and over and over again by his dad and his stepdad and other people. And so what he did in this time is he brought it before God and he said, God, where were you in this time? And God spoke to him and he says, I was right there protecting you. As painful as it was, I was there keeping you safe. Because God, the thing about this, we can get into, if we have a loving God, why does he allow evil? Okay, that's a discussion for another time. But God allows free will, and we have evil in the world. And so there's a balance where God's there with us, but there's evil in the world, and he created us with free will because we live in a fallen world. So God spoke to this man, and I forget his name, but he's running for governor of Colorado. So you can search that and come up with his name and then search the Taylor Welch. It's a really good podcast interview. And God said, I was right there with you in that instance. And he was, then I was like, oh man. And so that pain from that past that was keeping him stuck in that, he was able to give to God and realize God was there. It doesn't mean that you didn't go through pain, but he was comforted realizing he wasn't putting his faith and trust in God, but God was still there with him. And so that's interpreting things through God's lens. He's almighty. He's all-knowing. He's omniscient. He's omnipresent. So take things before God and ask him, Lord, where were you when I was experiencing blank? And you fill in the blank. If you do this and first tell the truth about, I'm not trusting you, God loves it when we're honest with him. He loves it. He knows what you're thinking anyway. So you lay the truth before God. I don't trust you. As a matter of fact, I am angry at you that you allowed this to happen. Pour out your heart. And then it's about, what do you want me to know about this? Where were you when I went through this? So check that out. Follow it. Trust God. We're never going to trust God as like we should, but we can trust God more and more and more. And I'll end with this. In 2004, I sat on the floor of my house in Lake Lotawana with a gun to my head. tapping my finger on the trigger. I didn't want attention. Years before that, my mom died, my dad died. I went through a divorce. I got fired. I was a top producing sales rep. I was living out of my ego. I thought I was so amazing. And then all of a sudden, I went from top producing sales rep with a company with 14 locations for 10 years to just falling apart because my life was built on a foundation of a house of cards. That was my ego. And I was living out of my ego. And when I had my mom die, my dad die, I went through a divorce, there were pains from my past that I didn't process. And so I got to a place where I was so bitter. And by the way, bitter will suck all the joy out of your life. And so I wanted to end the pain. I was tapping my finger on the trigger over and over, harder and harder, safety off, gun loaded with hollow points. And then all of a sudden, someone was knocking at the door. Over and over and over again, all I could think of is like, can I not even die in peace? So the person was very obnoxious and it wasn't just like a knock, 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 knock. It was like banging on the door. So finally I got up, I put the gun down, I went to the door, and this guy's like, just out of breath, kind of anxious looking. And he's like, God told me to come to your house right now. So if it wasn't for that knock at the door in 2004, I wouldn't be sharing this video with you today. And my life didn't transform overnight. It was years and years and years where I grew and understood how to talk to God, how to hear from God, and how to help him process my emotions so they don't process me.